Thank you very much, moderators, and thank you for the organizers for inviting me here to Hong Kong. I want everybody to be aware that we are actually celebrating AMR Antibiotic Awareness Week this week. And I think it's a very important and very poignant that we do have this, regional meeting here today and tomorrow. I also want to point out, and somebody, I think Lord O'Neill mentioned toilets. On the 19th of November, it will be World Toilet Day. And you can laugh all you want, but it's probably the most important public health intervention that we've invented. And it didn't require a global fund. But maybe a global funding is required to have more of them around. Anyway, so let me get to the subject at hand. And I think that, to correct the title, it's effect on the food supply, nutrition, and also production. And this is probably the easiest invitation that I've had to give in a public forum. This is what we know. This slide. We know very little. Well, but I didn't come all this way just to show you this slide. I have to give you a bit more. When we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, it's very clear when we talk about public health and antimicrobial resistance really to focus in on Sustainable Development Goal number 3. And all the attention is very much focused on that. And of course, with antimicrobial resistance, that we do talk about Sustainable Development Goal number 17, about partnerships, reaching out between different sectors, academia, government, private sector. But when we talk about food, agriculture, it becomes a lot more complicated. From my organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization, which is his mandate, is to look after zero hunger, no poverty. But as a veterinarian, and working on AMR issues or infectious diseases, we also see that life on land as a sustainable development goal is important as we bring out this issue. Or life below water. Or when we talk about clean water and sanitation, something that we heard about this morning. Sustainable cities and communities and how we feed these. Or the responsible consumption. Or about gender equality. And I'll get to some of these points as I go on. But also about decent work and economic growth, or quality education. Peace and justice. When we have enough food and food safety in our communities, you won't have those individuals looking for a better life elsewhere, because they're satisfied where they are with the food that they have, with the shelter they have. So again, food, agriculture, adequate nutrition, and the perils of antimicrobial resistance do impact many of the Sustainable Development Goals. Looking at all the little red dots represent contaminants or medicines, as you want to call it. And so we are very much linked, as we've heard many of you, One Health believers. We're all interconnected, certainly. In the FAO Action Plan, there are 4 pillars that we look at in how we work with the countries, with the different stakeholders, and that is to create that awareness. It's behavior change, it's communication, and it's communication. Have the evidence, the surveillance, and the capabilities in place, and as well as the good practices in agriculture and food production. And all this requires the oversight of governance. And it's not about also the ministries, it's about the professional and about the license to practice. And this fits in with the Global Action Plan as published by the World Health Organization and incoherent with the Global Action Plan, which the FAO with the World Organization for Animal Health, the OIE, helped work out the text. Some of the issues that I will discuss are that as veterinarians, we also take the Hippocratic Oath. Above all, do no harm. DALIs, we don't have that in veterinary medicine. We've tried and we will continue trying. But the burden of diseases and to give an attribution to a certain entity, whether it's nutrition, whether it's an infectious disease, whether it's stress related, makes DALIs very, very difficult for us. The same thing with the DDDs and trying to get that denominator correct in veterinary medicine, whether you're talking about bees or a dairy cow or a horse or a dog. I will talk a little bit about the animal source foods, the production systems, the value chains, women and children, the growing population, critically important antimicrobials, growth promotion, and attribution. So we see that as countries become wealthier, they want more animal source foods in their diets. And there's good news in this that provides that adequate nutrition for a child's cognitive growth, those vitamins, those amino acids, quality protein in order to lead a productive life. And the production systems are increasing in quantity, in amounts, across the world, but at a disparaging rate. If we look at the value of some of these commodities from agriculture, we do see that the animal-sourced foods rank at the high end, top 5. And of value, they really surpass what we have in the crops. So if antimicrobial resistance, and we have to remember that humans are terrestrial mammals themselves. All of you here are terrestrial mammals. So what separates that issue about health in humans also affects the health of animals. So the value of these animal sourced foods is incredible for the world economy. Now we've surpassed already the amount of people that live in the rural areas and now live in urban settings or peri-urban settings. And how to feed these world megapolises is quite a challenge to ensure that there's quality food. We also see that with global fish production, that we've already surpassed the amount of aquaculture raised fish products than what we have that are wild caught, and this will continue to grow. References to Lord O'Neill's message earlier this morning is the amount of antimicrobial consumption for food animal production by country will increase in the dark circles anticipated for the year 2030, unless we do something about it. And this does not include what's in aquaculture, which is growing, and does not include what is being used on crops, which is also growing. Now, most of the medicines that are being used are tetracyclines and penicillins, but there is a whole array of others. Now, we do see that and we do agree that the use of the highest priority critically important antimicrobials, such as 3rd and 4th generation cephalosporins or fluoroquinolones and macrolides for animal use is of greatest concern. The therapeutic use, prophylactic use, and growth promotion will also be kind of discussed a little bit today and maybe give us something to discuss at the Q&A. Needless to say, if the next victim could be you're actually looking at a victim. I was hospitalized a year ago for 12 days because of a macrolide-resistant Haemophilus influenza, which still lingers on a little bit. So we do see that antimicrobials or streptomycins and tetracyclines are being used on plants, and they're called pesticides. They're not called antimicrobials. So again, there's some definitions that we need to be aware of. So here are some crops and some figures about the uses of oxytetracycline or streptomycin on apples, peaches, and pears. This slide, stolen from the Department of Health from the UK, shows how complex what we are discussing here today is. And we all have a role to play to mitigate, to address surveillance, to address interventions in dealing with the environment, human health, animal health, environmental health. So the environmental health story is also complex. This is what the lawyer sees. They see the animal health law, a pesticide legislation soil quality law, agriculture law, all the interconnectivity between them. So it's not necessarily only the veterinary or the physicians or the public health officials that have to be involved with establishing coherent law across ministries. Often enough, we talk about integrated surveillance. Sounds good. Probably sounds good from one realm of the people that are present here. But to accomplish this is quite more complicated. If we look at the food and agriculture sector, I can think about 15 sectors that we would include that go from fruit, rabbits, dairy, beef, shrimp, mollusks, egg-laying chickens, bees, honey. And if I multiply by 3, because I'm talking about small farmers, medium commercial operators, or the intensive large-scale commercial entities, we're talking about 3 sectors. 45 sectors for integrated surveillance. If on top of that I look at the food production chain and critical control points for surveillance, or the feed industry, or effluents and waste management, or your pets, we have over 50 sectors that need to be contemplated in any sort of design for integrated surveillance. So it's a sound idea, but a complex in its implementation. And certainly, we need to start somewhere. One of the works that we are doing at the Food and Agriculture Organization is this progressive management pathway, where you have a vision of where you want to be. And you're starting at stage 0. You don't really know. What do I need to do first? What do I need to do second? And implement that plan. And the way we see it, according to the progressive management pathway with the 4 pillars that I discussed, the governance, awareness, the practice, and the surveillance, is that at each step of the way, you become much more competent. And what I would envision is that maybe the dairy sector is much more advanced than, let's say, the swine production sector or the crops. So we begin with the awareness. Each sector will probably have at different stages, and maybe towards the end, come together to be able to have a coherent national, not only plan, but also the execution and success of that plan. One of the things that we haven't really tackled very much is the plethora of falsified, substandard medicines, and what is that attribution to antimicrobial resistance. We're just starting to scratch the surface on that. So there are gaps. There are gaps of report on the AMR surveillance has been highlighted several times. What are the impacts on animal health and human health, and the direct attribution to that? What are the bacteria involved? There is limited knowledge concerning the transmission of antimicrobial resistance genes within agricultural sites and to humans via the food chain. So the human risks are posed by certainly release in the agriculture, the resistance genes that are present in the environment, or the bacteria themselves that are in the environment. And we do see that food animals are vehicles for AMR transmission, but are also endpoints in themselves. So most of the literature, as far as economic impact, and we heard about it this morning, is on the potential impact to human health. But antibiotics are needed to treat sick animals, and resistance in animal pathogens may lead to therapy failure, which has a negative effect on the health and welfare when these diseases cannot be treated. Other consequences will vary depending on why and how different animal species are kept, whether they're companion animals, very important for our own well-being, our children, if there's for sports and our entertainment, or whether they're food producing. And I'll focus a bit more on food producing here. Now, with agricultural systems, we could have a semi-biosecure poultry facility, or we do have the open-air pastoral environments that we do have to deal with in our animal care or animal breeding. And this varies across the world tremendously. So if we are to tailor interventions, we also have to recognize and understand the realities in which we have to work in. And this slide is to underline, or so I don't forget, that it's actually women that produce most food in the world. It is women that do take care of sheep, goats, chickens, pigs. The animal care is usually done by women. Men and boys will be herding camels and cattle, long distances usually. But it's women that really are a target for this communication, this care, this need. Then we have the peri-urban environments, which we really haven't learned to tackle. There's peri-urban agriculture underneath the houses, on rooftops, all because of the food insecurity, searching for food security. But then again, this is another reality. These are our healthcare systems at work, or not at work in this particular case. So diseases, these are contagious bacterial diseases in some cases when we talk about antibiotic awareness and antibiotic awareness week. Particularly in the veterinary realm, the respiratory and enteric diseases are the most important, followed also by mastitis. And as contagious diseases, the greatest risk comes with the higher contact rates, so intensification, bringing the animals together, having more contact rate between one and another. So if we are to produce enough food to feed the growing population, we're going to have more intensification. And with that, one of the fears is more antimicrobial use or misuse. So the production systems of my 50-plus sectors that I mentioned earlier, probably I would be able to target those intensive elements. Aquaculture, identical to terrestrial animals. I've been given the 2-minute sign, so I better hurry up. So about growth promotion, it does work. One of the medicines used commonly is monensin, which is has a lot of propionic acid, which is a relevant precursor in the glycolysis cycle. We've come out, the FAO Director General has come out very, very clearly, shared with the World Organization for Animal Health, the OIE, to phase out immediately antimicrobial use in animal feed. So with disease, there is a suffering, and the Hippocratic Oath that I mentioned, and the welfare issues, the financial losses, and the higher costs to the consumer of these commodities, should we not be able to produce what you want as a consumer. So access to effective antibiotics is imperative in the animal or food-producing realm. I'll scump that, go faster. One thing that we do see that is actually quite scary is that there's a trend to have a broader, or to have use of broader spectrum activities in the veterinary realm, and that is, I think, an area of concern for us. And without that proper diagnostics that we talked about this morning, I think this will continue. So are we ready for more diseases as the antibiotic arsenal is reduced? We need to look for those alternatives. I'm going fast. The economic analysis. There are 4 main sources of impact. One is the direct disease effects, that market disruption, the control measures in order to tackle that problem that you have on the farm or in the community or in the region, and the effects beyond the livestock sector, which include the impacts on human health, the public health system that we heard about, tourism, and even wildlife as a sponge of the problems that we cause when we produce our food. Costs, there are costs within the livestock sector, and there's costs beyond the livestock sector. The benefits, the same. Now, the 4 pillars of food security is food availability, food access, stability, and the utilization of this. So to have sufficient quantities of food appropriate for quality. Life is important to the consumer, to the communities. There are 3 videos that you will have, I think, on here. This is a One Health approach in Bangladesh, one in Kenya of raising dairy animals, and then one in the UK of what has happened with the veterinary community or the veterinary profession there of farmers working together with veterinarians for better and prudent use of antimicrobials. Healthy animals do not need antibiotics, will be my last conclusion. So thank you very much for your kind attention.